Thank you for tuning in to Entertain the Geeky, your source for nerd news.
Hey guys, what's up? This is Jason back at you with more nerd news. So as promised, we are sitting here with my good friend Scott Samson.
Hello.
Who is just come back from the ComicsPro Retailer Summit out in where? Where do they hold
that? It was
that
in Portland this year.
Oh, so Portland. The dream of the 90s is alive in Portland.
All of the 90s. The dream of the 1490s is alive in Portland.
So Scott, I guess for those those out there that might be listening that are unfamiliar, can you break down what the ComicsPro meeting is?
ComicsPro organization is a retailer organization that's put together to advocate for the retailers in the comics industry. Basically, we were looking. The industry itself was looking to find a way to address some issues that retailers often run into with the publishers in a way that would be professional and respectful. And the best way to do that is to have as many retailers as possible speaking with one voice. And ComicsPro seeks to be that voice because the comics industry, unfortunately, the retail industry, is driven a lot by people who are what we would call hobby retailers, people who, I have a second job and, or, I'm going to start my store with just my personal collection and see how long it goes.
Sure.
And those people have a tendency to talk to the publishers in a way that comes across as, I'm excited about this because as a fan, I'm excited about this.
Right.
Whereas at ComicsPro, we look to have more discussions that are, we as an industry are excited about this because we think we will be able to sell it because you've given us the appropriate tools to sell it. And so it's much less of a, here's a bunch of creators that we're going to, bombard you with, and much more of a, here are the sales tools you will need. Here are the selling points. As some of the retailers have talked to the publishers about, we don't need you to tell us these are the products that you should be excited about. We need you to tell us these are the products that your customers will be excited about. Right. Here's the best way to get them excited.
Right, so trying to find the proper way to pitch these ideas to a customer base.
Yeah, and also trying to find a way to answer some of the questions that our customers are going to come to us with about, so what does this mean?
Right.
And sometimes publishers are good about giving those answers, and sometimes they're less good, and I'll try not to throw too much shade on too many publishers, but that might happen.
Yeah, well, that happens on my show quite a bit.
Shade being thrown?
I literally just talked about one of the things we're probably going to touch on, the Marvel Fresh Start. I just talked about that. Last night on my show.
It would be impossible for us to not talk about it.
Right. But so I guess for me, just to give us kind of a rundown of what publishers are represented and who they send to represent them to these kinds of things.
Yeah, so it's much less like I was saying, a creators expo.
Right.
It's not like Comic-Con or anything like that.
Right, you're not having fans standing around waiting for autographs and stuff.
Exactly. So to give you an idea, the vendors that were at and I'll just run through it.
Yeah.
Some of these vendors you guys will never have heard of, and trust me, you don't need to have heard of them. Ace Universe, Action Lab, Aftershock Comics, American Retail Supply,
all right.
Archie, Art Brand Studios. If you want to giggle a lot, Art Brand Studios, they're producing these like what they consider high quality art prints of superhero characters and things like that. Some of them are cool.
Okay, I was going to say, you prefaced that with they think.
Yes. One of the guys who's responsible for this is an artist who has given himself the title The Painter of Light. He also produced a film about his own life for ABC Family and had Jared Padalecki star as him. This dude looks nothing like talk about the most like self-glorified, like I am important and I am handsome.
All right.
So Attaboy, BCW Supply, Sam Humphries and Jen Bartel were there. representing themselves and talking about how can we help you get excited about our book Blackbird that's coming out from Image,
Sure.
Black Mask Studios, Boom Studios, Comic Book Legal Defense Fund, CGC, Collection Drawer, Comic Hub, Consortium Ingram, Dark Horse, DC, Devil's Due, Diamond Comics Distributors, Eagle Moss. They didn't actually show up. Fan Sets, First, Second Books, GTS Distribution, Hero Initiative, Humanoids, IDW, Image, Lion Forge, Marvel, Max Protection, Microcosm, Oni, Paper Cuts, Pop-Up Shops, Ram V, Read Pop, Renegade Comics, Sit Comics, Skybound, Titan, Valiant, Viz. And they send their marketing and sales teams for the most part.
Okay.
With the exception of Marvel sent David Gabriel, who is the head of sales, vice president of sales, who in the past has tried to make me look like an idiot on a personal level on many occasions. This time, managed not to do that.
All right.
Felt pretty good about that. Actually apologized for some of the issues that I raised and said that he would look into trying to fix them. Really excited about that.
Okay. It's nice to get that kind of feedback from someone that can make the changes that you think need to be made.
They also sent his sort of second in command and John Nee, the new publisher.
Okay.
And they also brought along Matthew Rosenberg to talk about one of his new books. But what was interesting, perhaps, telling of Marvel's presence at these events is they were notably absent from the discussion where we as retailers were going to try and talk to as many of the publishers as possible and address some of the questions and concerns that we have. So all of the publishers who were there had representatives in that room, with one exception, which was Marvel. David happened to show up just after we finished that part of the meeting.
Of course.
Somehow.
Oh, I missed it. Sorry, guys. Sorry.
So yeah, it's not, or at least we as an organization try to not have it be just, here's the books we've got coming up for you, and this is, stuff that's going to be on the internet in 5 minutes. We try to have it be more of a productive discussion of, these were where you guys hit last year, these were where you guys missed last year, this is why you're making it hard for us, and this is how you've made it easy for us.
Well, I remember, I think I had a conversation with you at one point back when Dark Horse was doing the kind of first big crossover that they did with the Alien universe, with Prometheus and Alien versus Predator and all of their properties kind of mixed into one story across like 4 or 5 miniseries. That you had said something about, look, there should be a release, a hardcover release of this that has the whole thing in order, because the fans at the time, and I know me, even when I was working there reading the book, at the time I was just like, I hate this, right? Because I have to wait. This book came out that I would love to read, but according to the inside cover, I have to wait another week before this other book comes out because I have to read that book first. Right. And it was just very frustrating from a release schedule standpoint.
Right.
And that actually happened.
Yeah.
They released a nice chronological hardcover. It was beautiful. I own it.
And it's one of those things where they are often looking for answers. They're saying, okay, so we tried this way of publishing this thing out last year. How did that work for you guys?
Right.
We tried incentivizing you to order more of our product through this incentive, like through deeper discounts or returnability or whatever it was. Did that work out, or should we try the other thing?
Right.
And I think that has been one of the most interesting parts about ComicsPro that I've attended for the last 5 years now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Is it's much less the Diamond Retailer Summits are much more like, hey, here's the things to get excited about that's going to be on the internet in the next 5 minutes. Whereas ComicsPro is much more, we're going to tell you a little bit about that stuff because we need to inform you about stuff that's coming out.
Changes that are being made. Yeah.
But we're going to get through that as quickly as possible. And then we're going to start asking you guys some questions. And we want to hear your questions. And, we want to hear your concerns.
Right.
Because at ComicsPro, the publishers have a much finer understanding of the fact that we are their partners. That ultimately, even though the people who read and love these books are the end consumer of that product, we are the end consumer for their part of the supply chain.
Sure.
Like, they are selling to us, not leasing to us to sell to customers.
Right. Except
for whenever returnability is offered, it is much, much different than the book market. And so they need to make sure that we have the best tools to be able to, and oftentimes the best tools means great books.
Right.
Oftentimes the best tools can mean returnability or deeper discounts. If we can sell, 10 copies of a book that we get 50% off on, that's good. If we can sell 10 copies of a book that we're going to get 65% off on, that's better.
Sure.
And so they're trying to figure out, or if we can sell 10 copies of a book that we ordered 20 copies of, but we maybe would have only ordered 5.
Right.
But returnability was offered, so we ordered more of them, and so more people got the chance to take a look at the book. Right. Those are all the things that
and then maybe
discussed.
that will affect your numbers going forward in the future on subsequent issues of said book. Yeah.
We'll be able to find a real and accurate ceiling for those books, as opposed to just taking a shot in the dark.
Well, I think that's oftentimes the hardest thing, right? Is being able to look at something, look at number 2 of a book, and you have to order it before number 1 has even been on the shelf, and you've had a chance to gauge the level of interest and reaction to that book. Yeah. So, okay, so it sounds like, like I said, more of a business convention.
It is much more of a business conference but it is still, like, I got to rub elbows with some of my favorite creators and to talk to some cool people and all that kind of stuff. But,
so there's a personal connection that you can have to it as well as a business connection. Yeah. All right. So if you had to go into something that just you went there, and I'm sure this probably happens every year. You went there and you were sitting down listening to this person talk or that person talk, and something just shocked you, and you went, "Wow, that is really interesting." What would you say that was the biggest surprise?
Biggest surprise was DC moving out of the previews catalog.
Yeah.
Creating their own version of previews where they will be able to, similar to what Marvel does, release their own connected catalog.
Sure.
Where we'll still be ordering everything through DC or through Diamond as we would normally, but
Absolutely.
It won't be part of the catalog itself. And their new offering, DC Nation, which will be a chance for fans to be able to see previews of upcoming books and to read interviews and all that kind of stuff with creators closer to when the books are coming out, which will create a secondary sort of like push for excitement and enthusiasm.
Right.
Because one of the things that's really frustrating about previews is people will look at something in previews and be like, I'm really excited about this. And then 3 months later when the book comes out, they have totally forgotten about it.
Right. I forgot how excited I was.
I forgot how excited about it. Or even worse is whenever there'll be some sort of like big announcement on Entertainment Weekly or something like that. Like, in 6 months, Archie's going to do this with blah, blah, blah. And people are like, I'm excited about this. Make sure to add that to my bullet hold. And I'm like, it hasn't even been solicited yet.
Right, yeah, we've got 3 months or so still before we're even going to see
I'll write something down, but
give me a Post-it note. We'll stick it to the computer screen.
They're going to change the title of that 5 times before it actually comes out, if it comes out.
Right, it's very, very hard, yeah.
But, so, the approach of, here's solicitations of this stuff. We're going to be able to give you all the information you as retailers are going to need to order, and you as fans are going to need to start building anticipation.
Sure.
And then a couple of weeks down the line, here's something to further that anticipation.
Right.
It's a really good approach, and I honestly wish more publishers would take into consideration that kind of
well, sure. I mean, I feel like we've, just as a fan who's been reading comics since I was a little kid, I feel like we've seen these kinds of things happen before, though, with little previews magazines, and Image did it recently, most recently probably with Image Plus. But it just always seems like it's not something that the publisher puts a lot of stock into, I guess, right? So they're not as good at promoting it. They're not as good as at getting the copies out to you and making sure that you have what you need. So I just feel like we've seen these systems happen in the past and just not work right.
Sure. And I think that is largely because previews as a catalog, as a sales device, suffers from the fact that in consumers, that fans can buy it too. If previews was just made for retailers,
sure,
they would tell us a lot more.
Sure. They could, yeah.
But in the way that the world works now, then we would tell, or less professional of us would then spout all over the internet, holy shit, they're going to kill Black Panther in issue 42, or whatever it's going to be. Like, where all the publisher was trying to tell us was, hey, look, there's this big storyline coming up. You should order more of this because of this.
Right.
People are going to be excited about it. Or if there's going to be this big surprise. But because of the nature of the industry, it just doesn't work that way. So it has, in turn, lowered the level of the game to where it is,
Sure.
which is really unfortunate
Yeah.
because it could be so much more useful. And I think that what these magazines are an attempt to do is to provide for people who don't even pick up previews
Right.
a chance to get excited about these things that their friend had told them about or that they saw on Newsarama whenever it got announced. And now here's a chance to reinvigorate your excitement about it because your retailer is giving you a copy of this for free.
Sure.
So it's exciting. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Right. If it works, if they put the proper push behind it
Right.
to make it work. So that's like a huge shift in what Diamond Previews is. I mean, Marvel's been, absent from it for so long. They've never really been, a big part of it except for like their merchandise, I guess.
Sure.
But taking out DC, I mean, did you get any insight into how that's going to change what the catalog will be?
So because DC will be absent, it makes room for two publishers who've been part of the green part of the catalog, the middle part of the catalog
Sure.
for a long time, to move up into the front part of the catalog and become premier publishers, which is a big deal for retailers because premier publishers are set at a different discount tier than the other publishers, and they're also given much more space and like unique room to sort of like display all their stuff.
Right.
And those publishers are Boom Studios and Dynamite,
Wow.
which have been sort of the like two of the big players in the back half of the catalog for a really long time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think the only that sort of leaves the only big publisher of note in the back half of the catalog as Oni, like Oni, Titan, Valiant,
Right.
those publishers. But Oni's been around for a real long time,
Yeah.
and they're sort of still relegated to the back half of the catalog, which is sort of an interesting thing. But Boom, as a measure of celebrating the fact that they're moving to the front part of the catalog, which is really exciting for retailers and for Boom because it'll give a lot of retailers an opportunity to try some of their stuff out in a big way, is
Absolutely.
they're going to be offering for the first month that they're part of the front part of the catalog an additional 20% off to retailers everything they're soliciting that month.
So comics, trades, merchandise,
Everything.
T-shirts.
Everything the Boom does for
Wow.
that month, we're going to get a better discount on, which means you can expect to see more Boom books in stores for that month.
Absolutely.
And they also talked about how this gives them an opportunity to do a lot of things that people who are part of the back half of the catalog don't get the opportunity to do as often, which is backlist sales. And they were talking
Right.
about how there's the chance, and the way they talked about it is a pretty big chance they might be doing 90% off total of backlist trades to try and get more people to put Boom Studios trades in their stores.
Well, and they definitely have had some amazing books. They put themselves on the map with just some of the greatest stuff. I mean,
And what's perhaps most important about the stuff that they put themselves on the map with is so much of it is non-licensed material.
right. They do have a lot of licensed material, but yeah, a lot of what's made them a power player in the industry
Yeah,
has been creator-owned type stuff.
especially in the last couple of years with things like Lumberjanes, Giant Days, Grass
Absolutely.
Kings.
Yeah.
Most recently, the book that surprised a lot of people was Abbott, which is kind of a blaxploitation black female private detective in the 70s book that
Okay.
Saladin Ahmed, the guy who's writing Black Bolt at Marvel, launched at
Okay.
Boom, and it sold out immediately. It's one of the only books from Boom in the last couple of months to have to go to a second printing.
Oh, wow.
And that all happened because of Boom trying to leverage the relationships with places like NPR and legitimate news outlets to promote these things that have people talking about that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Which is a thing that ultimately at the convention or the conference was a big discussion, was we as an industry need to be looking to find a way to find more readers. And so I wouldn't be at all surprised to see, big newspapers having more articles about that kind of stuff. Big news sites having more articles about comics.
Right.
Because the publishers realize that you can only reach so many people if all you're doing is talking to Newsarama, Bleeding Cool,
Sure.
Comics Beat, CBR, all that kind of stuff.
Entertain the geeky.
Exactly. They should be talking to you guys more.
Okay, cool.
Honestly,
All right.
You're not owned by a publisher the way that Avatar Comics owns Bleeding Cool, and the way that Lions Forge owns Comics Beat, and all that kind of stuff.
That's true. We are unchained.
You are independent, geeky media.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so that big shift, that big dynamic change, is going to mean a lot for the industry.
Absolutely.
It's going to mean that they're going to be also shifting a lot of things around in the back half of the catalog, because they're going to have more room for where these other publishers had these sort of like expanded sections. And one of the things that they talked about is there's going to now be a manga section in previews.
Okay. So it's not just going to be scattered in a couple of back pages.
Right.
Yeah.
They also talk about how they're going to be moving books and magazines into the regular green portion of previews.
Okay.
So people who stop reading once they hit those pages after the green section are going to have something more to look at.
Absolutely.
One of the things that they also announced was, and it's always been curious to me that previews has had that flip side cover.
Yeah.
Now whenever you flip it over and you open it up, you're going to be looking at merchandise flipped over.
Oh, okay.
So if you want to start looking at merchandise, if all you care about is t-shirts and statues and all that kind of stuff, flip the catalog over, open it up, page 1, here's all that stuff.
Wow. That's going to be kind of cool.
And maybe one of the most important changes for fans and for retailers alike is previews is finally going to be digital in a way that is big and important. It had been digital in air quotes for a while. If you bought a copy of previews, you could give someone a free digital copy of previews. But that's lame.
Right. You still had to buy it.
Right.
And someone had to shell out the money.
Now you're going to be able to interact with this catalog in a way that JCPenney figured out, 15 years ago.
Wow, it's a shame.
We in the comics industry, we are on the cutting edge of technology only when it matters, and only when it matters to no one, and way behind the times when it would matter to our entire industry. But now you're going to be able to go online and interact with the catalog in a way that we as retailers have longed for, because it'll mean more of our fans, more of our customers are interacting with catalog.
Sure.
And
that's what you want.
Exactly. Is people coming to us and saying, hey, I saw this thing.
Can you get me one? Yeah, absolutely.
And there's some stuff that they announced about the possibility of people being able to make orders from their couches at home, which sounds kind of cool, but I want to see the implementation before I say that that's cool, because the last thing I want is to suddenly find that I have ordered something for a customer because they fell asleep with their face on their tablet, and as it moved around, they ordered, all of these pornographic statues.
Yes. Unfortunately, there's a dark side of previews in that regard.
An unlooked at underbelly, we'll call it.
Yes, that's the seedy underbelly of previews. Okay, so we've kind of talked about some of the dynamic shifts and some of kind of the big business type things that are happening. But so I guess to bring it all to a close, is what about this convention resonated with you, on a personal level?
Creatively or industry? Both?
Grab
one of either?
Yep.
Okay. From an industry standpoint, I think one of the things that a lot of people were worried about coming into this event, because this is the event where we talk about these kinds of things, is last year was a bad year for the comic industry. Diamond talked about 10% reduction in comics.
Wow.
9% reduction in trade paperbacks, 9.5% reduction in merchandise. That's a big hit.
Yeah.
However, they only lost 1% of their customers.
Okay.
So that means that people were still trying to open stores. That means that we didn't lose as many overall retailers as we unexpected. But we lost some big names in the last year.
Sure.
One of the guys who was there, Perry Plush, he has been in the industry for decades. And he retired because he just couldn't make it work last year. But he was there, and it was sad to hear him talking about, like, is there a way for me to continue to be part of this organization? Because I believe that I still have a lot that I can offer to this organization, even though I don't have a store anymore.
That's heartbreaking.
And there was a guy who got hired as part of the organization to help, sort of us in a digital fashion, who was a retailer who gave up on his store last year. And I'm thrilled with that fact because that guy he's awesome. And he was one of my favorite people to see at the convention or at the conference every year. So I'm hoping that it'll mean he'll be at the one next year.
Right. You think that his talents are better served in that capacity?
Yeah. He talked about closing his store as my wife let me follow my dream for many years now, and I'm going to give her the opportunity to follow hers now. And so we're closing the store, and I'll figure out what that means for me. But he was going to, I think, move back into the technology industry, and it seemed like a perfect opportunity for us as an organization to take all of his knowledge in that and put him to work for us.
Right. That's great.
But so a lot of the questions, a lot of the animosity that would typically be at one of these events towards like, well, darn it, those publishers just keep screwing us over,
right,
was gone because people were looking for answers. So you would have people sort of hesitatingly ask, so how did you do last year?
Right.
And when they heard that other places also had problems, it was definitely a sort of a wash of relief as they realized, okay, it wasn't just me.
Right. Well, because, when you're in your own situation, you get trapped in that reality. Like, what am I doing wrong?
Yeah, what am I doing wrong
right.
as opposed to what's happening in the industry
right.
around us?
Yeah.
And so as a result of that, everybody came to this meeting looking to find ways to move forward, looking to find answers.
Sure.
And much more open to the ideas. And we, as a group, decided to take some of the time that we would typically devote to some of the publishers to tell us about what they're working on, to instead work together. We had a whole couple hours where all we were doing was trying to game out some of the big problems that are happening in the comics industry right now for retailers, and try and find creative solutions for it. And it was,
amazing.
I was sitting with a retailer from Idaho and Portland, or Idaho and Oregon and Nevada and me. And I don't remember where the other guy was from.
Sure.
But we were all talking about how do we make this, how do we fix some of these big problems?
Right.
And it was really interesting. That was my favorite part of the organization part of the meeting, was people looking for answers and not looking to shout at publishers about the paper quality on that thing sucked, and why did you kill that character, and when are you going to launch this thing?
Okay.
From a creative avenue of my weekend or my week up in Portland,
sure.
I got to go to Image Expo, which I have only been to once before. Whenever I was in San Diego in San Diego for San Diego Comic-Con a couple years ago. And we got to hear a bunch of people talk about their new books that are coming out from Image. And there's a lot of stuff that's really cool. Chris Sabella is doing this book, Crowded, which is about a world in which you can kickstart assassinations, which seems kind of awesome.
No, Scott was telling me about this earlier, and I was immediately like, wow, that sounds like something I need to read.
Rob Guillory from Chew is doing a new book that he's writing and drawing called Farm Hands, about a guy who figures out how to grow humans.
That's going to make a lot of fans happy. I mean, Chew was such a big part of so many people's comic reading months.
And the way that he talked about it was Chew was sort of a humor book that wore a horror costume from time to time.
Sure.
But that he never really got to get as horror-oriented as he wanted to. And so this is his chance to kind of do some of that really creepy stuff that he knows he's capable of.
Sure.
And it sounded really exciting.
Okay.
And he seemed really excited about it. And there's some other books that got announced, but I think the ones that that ticked my boxes the most, there's a book coming out from Annie Wu that she is writing and drawing, and she's a first-time writer that she's doing called Dead Guy Fan Club, which is sort of a reflection of her own life in a weird way, like talking about how these characters met because they were part of an internet fan club for that guy, and now he's dead, so they meet up and sort of like start to try and figure out what happened and all this.
Okay, that sounds interesting. Yeah,
or at least that's kind of what I thought the book might be about. I was just so blown away by her enthusiasm that I didn't really pay that much attention to the pitch, and I was looking at the art, which was beautiful. And then Jen Bartel, who's never done interiors, is doing a book with Sam Humphries called Blackbird, and it sounds like they've created a really cool world. It's going to take place in LA, and the way they talked about it is it's not the glitzy glammy LA, it's the weird fluorescent signs LA. Like,
okay,
driving through the town and going like, what do they mean bullets and alcohol? Like,
okay.
But that kind of part of LA, but having magic as part of it too. Like that LA is a magical town, but it really has like enchanted jewelry and stuff like that. And they, like I mentioned, they were at the conference to talk about so we're excited about this project. What do we need to do to make sure that when it comes out in October that you guys are excited about this project?
Right, exactly. And getting your customers excited about it. Yeah, absolutely.
And there was a new Rick Remender book that got announced that sounds like him. He talked about it from the perspective of the main character is like a mechanic, and she's been a part of trucker convoys her entire life, to the point to which she doesn't have like a social security number or doesn't pay taxes, all this kind of stuff. And he's like, I could never be a part of that world. I would be like, man, it would be cool to drive a truck, and then like 24 hours later, they'd be like, never come back.
Right.
But and her father dies, so she's going to get revenge for him. But he's like, she's not this 360, spin kick, badass, because no one is.
Right, sure.
You don't just decide to get revenge and then become a badass.
Right.
He's like, so, there
movies would have you believe that's the opposite. But yes.
And he said, so she's obviously very physically capable because she's, a mechanic. She knows what, she is strong enough to, take an engine block out and all that kind of stuff. But she's going to run into problems where, where other people would run into problems if people with guns were coming after you.
Sure.
But that's where he got excited about the book, was I'm going to be able to tell a story that feels legitimate on that level.
Okay.
There's a bunch of cool stuff. I would definitely recommend checking out all of the news coming out of Image Expo.
I've been trying to keep our fans appraised of some of the things that I've noticed just throughout the week, because I knew you were there this week. I knew that's what was going on, so I kind of was keeping an eye on, because not everything is public yet. There's obviously information that can't be spoken about from your perspective, but the stuff that's public, I've been trying to keep up on it. I talked about Avengers.
The weirdest part of the whole weekend, I think, for me, was Todd McFarlane at the Image Expo.
Okay.
He was talking about Spawn and about the Spawn movie and all that other kind of stuff, but he dodged questions from the Image Expo, softball. He, I'm just going to toss this question up for you, and he's just like, that's not what I want to talk about.
Yeah,
I have a microphone in my hand, and I'm just going to say, I'm really excited about all these projects these people have got coming out, and someday maybe it'll be their movie that we're getting excited about. And it was just okay, good, but that guy wasn't asking you a hard question, dude.
Nope.
And then
McFarlane just, kind of self-centered.
They turned they were like, okay, now we have, we're going to take questions from the audience. And Todd just jumps out of his chair, jumps off of the stage, and starts walking over to people. And I'm just like, Todd McFarlane's going to be the guy who walks over and goes, you had a question.
Yeah, he's the moderator? Okay.
It was especially because a lot of the questions wound up being for him.
Right, sure.
It was just
so he's just kind of standing next to the person he's talking to, answering the question.
It was super weird.
All right. Well, it definitely sounds like we've got some exciting stuff to look forward to in the future.
I just nodded like you all could see that. I apologize.
But I want to thank Scott for coming on the show and
Yeah,
talking about it all with us.
Happy to be here. I'd love to come back sometime.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely trying. I mean, I talked to you about that when we set this up.
Yeah.
You know, I definitely would love to have you on the show. You're one of the most knowledgeable guys about the industry that I know.
Yeah, it's weird whenever you start to work at a comic book store and you're like the people that everybody comes to talk about comics, and then you become a manager of a store and you still have those juices going for you, but eventually you sort of, whenever you've been doing this job as long as I have, you become the guy that knows the most about the industry as opposed to
you become
books.
You're a businessman.
Exactly.
You're a businessman. Yeah.
I could be selling you shoes right now.
Yeah.
But that would be boring as hell.
It would. But thanks everybody out there for listening. If you like what we're putting down here, do me a favor, go on over to entertainthegeeky.com. We've got the blog posts there. We've got both the shows, Chris and Roger's show and my show. We've even got Matt and Jeff's Board Game Bros podcast. If you click on the podcast page, if Facebook is more your speed, check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/entertainmentgeeky. We're also on the Twitters, which I'm never really been.
Tweetars?
We're on the Tweetars, which I've never been the biggest, tweeter, whatever it is.
You have not twatted?
Chris does that. Chris
is the twitter?
Chris is the tweeter. The tweeter, the twatter. Yeah, Chris handles all that stuff. But we are on Twitter at EntertainGeeky. And keep your eyes peeled in the future. We are gonna get a Kickstarter going up for EG Games. We've got some different things we'd like to publish and we'd like to get out to you pronto. So check out the website, check out all that stuff. And until next time, guys, stay geeky.